is up? Welcome to another episode of the Hit It To Hoover podcast. Often confused with the other Mitch Davis Show podcast because, when you're working as much, it is what it is. Tonight, to be joined by my boy, my man, one of my groomsmen at my wedding, the Jared Redding from InsideTheRebels.com. We're going to be briefly talking about Ole Miss baseball. Obviously, go check out the interview we had with Mike Bianco. Jared's got a lot of great content with Bianco as well. We're going to kind of do like a brief overview like we always do, and as the season progresses, obviously Jared will probably come on once a week like he did last season. But at this time, Jared Redding, minus my co-host Jake Nichols, who is sick. Welcome to the Hit It To Hoover podcast. What is up?
Welcome back.
Yeah, baseball's here, baby.
Welcome back.
Let's go. Like this is year 2 of the Hit It To Hoover podcast.
Yeah, I think he just texted me a second ago. It was in the middle of while I was watching a hype video for Tennessee baseball, one that Jake quoted, and then right after that I scroll underneath, and then Ole Miss releases their hype video, and that just kind of hit me. It just hit me. It's like, wait, there's a baseball game tomorrow? Like, I'm still in basketball mode. Unfortunately.
Well, I was going to say Ole Miss basketball we don't really talk about right now, but that's okay.
For those who support Ole Miss and for those who are kind of suffering,
next weekend, I'm going to be in Starkville for the first time at the Dude. I'm going to be at the Dude. So, by the way, if anybody listening, I know this is probably not going to be the most popular show to say I'm going to be at the Dude, but I will be at the Dude next Friday and Saturday for Mississippi State, Arizona State. I'll be at Swayze on Saturday for Ole Miss and Delaware. But, Jared, let's talk Ole Miss baseball. National champions, defending national champions. How's the mood in Oxford right now?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I think it's one of those where, you look at what Ole Miss was as a program, and by comparison, Mississippi State is a baseball program as well. Both teams, they constantly won. They were always constantly national conversation, making it to the postseason every single year. Anything other than that is unacceptable. But when you talk about good programs and great programs, there's always one thing that separates that as a national champion. And one thing that the state of Mississippi has shown the last 2 years is that while a lot of people associate them with football, they are just as much a baseball team. And in the 2020s, Mississippi is the king of college baseball. But Ole Miss was last year, and in the most improbable way imaginable. Obviously, going from everyone knows the story right now. They went 7-14 in conference play. It was a rock bottom, almost run ruled on their home turf by Southeast Missouri, of all teams, and ended up being the last team selected in the NCAA tournament, turning it around with the best senior class of program history and the best class of veterans like Tim Elko, Justin Bench, Kevin Graham, and then we're 10-1 in the College World Series. So, to answer your question very short and simple, it is the hype that I have never seen in my 23 years of life in Oxford.
Jared, we'll talk about the team, but I do want to ask you, because you're a native Mississippian, and now that I can officially say this, I am a Mississippi native myself. New Albany is home now. Very excited to be here. But I want to ask you, as a lifelong Mississippian, what is this state? What makes the state different when it comes to baseball? Because I saw your tweet the other night from Oxford High School. It looked like a freaking, nice college ballpark. Like, it looked like a nice, and of course, New Albany plays at the nice BNA Park right up the street from the house. What makes the state different for college baseball?
I think it's one of the things where, people talk about baseball as being America's pastime. And obviously, it's a sport, with that's very much associated just in, southern United States, in the pros, a lot of it's based in New York and all that sort of stuff. But South is just kind of, baseball is just kind of, it's always kind of ingrained in its DNA. Scott Berry said it during last year's Super Regional, you can't drive around, at nighttime in the spring without seeing some lights in the distance, and they're baseball lights. It's just your local park. Youth league, middle school, high school, and if you pass by, Oxford or Starkville or Hattiesburg or Jackson or Cleveland, Mississippi, or Itabena, there's baseball going on. In Norman, Mississippi, I throw them in there as well. It's kind of in I think what I think just the state of Mississippi and the way that they love and adore the sports team, has such a burning passion for them, it attracts so much talent from everywhere across the country. Although all these rosters are a lot of Mississippi kids, there's more out-of-state kids with all of them, and they're driven to just kind of the family environment, family atmosphere, where they feel like they can belong, and it's more than just baseball for them. And plus, when you throw talented players in the mix and talented coaching in the mix, I guess I hate to say the big three, if you will, because Delta State's a phenomenal baseball program as well. But Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Southern Miss are blessed with great coaching, and I think that's kind of separates it from a lot of places in the country.
And I think, Jared, you and I cover JUCO football here in the state of Mississippi, Northwest, ICC. I think also, from what I'm learning, is JUCO baseball is just as big down here. I mean, Northwest has got a great program. ICC's got a good program. Northeast has got a good program. It's such a baseball state. Now that state has won a national championship, Ole Miss has won a national championship, can you see another Mississippi school, maybe Ole Miss State, but maybe Southern, getting a national championship this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was capsulated perfectly when my good friend at Hub City Spokes / Pinebell Sports, Andrew Abity, the Southern Miss beat writer there, for the front cover of his paper, it showed a picture of a Southern Miss baseball player, and it said, "Is it our turn?" ? Saying that now it seems like the pressure is on. And, a lot of people, because they associate, Southeastern Conference baseball being the best of it is, Ole Miss State constantly being in the national conversation every single year. Southern Miss has a dang good tradition, too, especially in the last 20 years, especially since Scott Berry took over the program. Although they've only been to one College World Series appearance, that coming in 2009. You saw how close they've been the last couple of years. The one thing that has kept them from Omaha the last 2 years is Ole Miss.
Yeah.
And so who knows what would have happened had Southern Miss taken 2 of 3 or swept Ole Miss last year, because they gave everything they had at them. And Southern, it gives Ole Miss and Mississippi State headaches, in midweeks every single year, because they play each other twice a year, once in Pearl and then once at that site. So I mean, if Southern's got to be in the conversation. But Ole Miss is obviously going to be a conversation coming off of a national championship, returning 53% at bats, 53% of the innings thrown in Omaha, and then Mississippi State coming off of a down year. But Mississippi State, what they do. That type of result is absolutely unacceptable, and they're not going to accept anything less. So they're going to be reloaded. Ole Miss is going to be reloaded. Southern Miss, depending on who you talk to in Mississippi, may or may not be more talented than Ole Miss. Ole Miss has got something to say about that, and I think rightfully so. I think the star power backs it up on paper, but I feel like at least one Mississippi team this year is going to go to Omaha. It's just a matter of which one and how many.
Jared, I'm going to ask you like 1 or 2 questions about Ole Miss baseball this year, but this is the question I want to ask you about this is, you and I were in Omaha this year. We went out there, traveled out there with Ole Miss. I know a lot of people who were out there. You went out there with Mississippi State as well, with your father. When you were out there, what were people saying about the state of Mississippi, about the fan bases Ole Miss took over. There was 30,000 Ole Miss fans, just like the year before there was 30,000 Mississippi State fans out there. What did you hear people saying about the state of Mississippi and the way that they love their college baseball?
Yeah, I think across the landscape of college baseball, you already knew that Mississippi was a very much relevant baseball state, but like I said earlier, the difference between good and great, and the separator from great is obviously the hardware to back it up. It's interesting when you walk past, Charles Schwab Field in Omaha. I still got to get used to that name. It's still Grand TD Ameritrade Park. If you walk past, I think it's along the right field wall of that stadium, there's plaques of national champions by decade. And obviously 2020, we did not have a national champion, but the only team that was up there was Mississippi State University. And I think about that, and now that Ole Miss has won it all, you can put underneath there 2022 University of Mississippi. And everything else is left blank down there. And you know what each team does every year. But yes, to answer your question, there was an AM radio reporter up there. I remember like it was yesterday. He was talking to all the members of the media about their beats kind of perspective on this World Series and all that. And he couldn't help but mention, like, look, is this more drive? Is this more of a drive now that Mississippi State's won it all. It's like, well, yes, obviously, for rivalry's sakes, but it's about the state of Mississippi as well. And it's about Ole Miss and just the way and all of the stuff that he had to overcome last year. Remember, this is the team that went from number one in the country to seemingly dead last in just a matter of weeks. And had to sweep LSU, sweep Missouri, and just make a push for digits to just get in there, let alone what happened after that. But I think this is a state that obviously is seen in a negative light for a lot of variety of reasons outside of sports. And one of the ways that Mississippi deals with that is well, we may not be able to compete with you in certain things. We can compete with you on the field of battle, especially when it comes to baseball, and especially when it comes to football as well. Baseball obviously having the hardware in recent times to boot. But if you see Southern Miss go to Omaha this year, and Ole Miss and Mississippi State don't, expect fans of Ole Miss and Mississippi State to go with this team, because if one thing that the pandemic has shown, if there's one thing that the Mike Leach death has shown, is that Mississippians, while we may have our differences, we look after one another, and we look at it sometimes kind of us against the world sometimes.
Jared, obviously I'm going to ask you like two questions about the current Ole Miss, and we're going to talk more in the season about Ole Miss, but you can only talk so much about the preseason until you actually ball meets the rubber pretty much. But I want to ask you, because that's just a follow-up question that now I'll have. Me being a non-Mississippi native, I'm not from here. I'm from Memphis. I'm from Memphis. But you mentioned taking care of each other, and this is now going way past baseball. But I want to ask you about. I've never asked you this. But what does being a Mississippian and now being able to tell the stories of fellow Mississippians, what does that mean to you in your career?
I mean, it was kind of part of my upbringing from the very beginning. For those who don't know me, I started off covering high school athletics for, while I was in high school. I was covering not only my classmates, but, friends of my classmates who were kind of part of us. So as far as, the covering Mississippi kids, they kind of became second nature. But it wasn't, that wasn't the focus from the very beginning, obviously, because of me trying to kind of, do what I'm good at, keep on doing it, see if it gets you somewhere. And as time kind of went on, I started covering statewide high school football. I began to realize, that the pageantry, the bloodlines, the guy up in South Haven, Mississippi is connected with the guy from Biloxi, Mississippi. The guy from Greenville, Mississippi is connected with the guy from Meridian somehow. And, from Corinth to Lorman, Mississippi, it just goes on and on. And, and there's love there. And obviously, I think, you look at rivalries and you think, it's venomous, and partially it is, you're going to have, as a brother, you're going to have some venomous things happen.
Oh, yeah.
It kind of comes, with, just the competitive nature that Mississippians all share. But it means the absolute world to me. And, when people talk, and someone has been asked me before is, why Mississippi? And it's like, what else do I need? Yeah. I have everything I could possibly need right here in Oxford, Mississippi. But this state has given more to me than I could ever give it. And the least I could do is serve my state. I feel like I'm doing that, in North Mississippi, and obviously when they play against these teams, and while supporting, these two states in really all sports. It's really hard to really describe into words how much kind of this state means to me, because I have an underdog mentality. Mississippi, in general, tend to have an underdog mentality based on what I said earlier. And so I do look at it as like, not only is it us versus the world, it's kind of me against the world a little bit. It's me against other kind of reporters outside, but I'm still simply trying to do my job. But if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. And one thing I love to do is to serve Mississippi and work with a Mississippi institution in the competitive field of play.
I will say this, just cause I'm not just saying this because you're one of my really good friends, but there is truly a lot of love for what you have done for this state. And it's really cool because people are like, oh my God, I know Jared Redding. And, when people, and we're going to talk, again, we're going to get back to Ole Miss baseball, but when I decided that I was going to move to New Albany to Tupelo, everybody's like, "Why are you moving to Mississippi? Why don't you move down to the coast? Why don't you move to Kentucky or wherever?" I'm like, "Why not? Why not Mississippi? Why not?" You know, and I first fell in love with this state when a certain coach was at Ole Miss that happened to be a prior career son of my grandfather. Everybody knows the story. I'm still good friends with the coach. He's now at Auburn, Hugh Freeze. I felt love with the state. I didn't necessarily fall in love with Ole Miss because some differences there. But I fell in love with the people down here. And now that personally I'm marrying into Mississippi State family, marrying into my father-in-law's side's all been from Mississippi, Clarksdale to be exact. The state is just different. Like I try to explain it to other people, it's different. Like people watch out for you. I remember, you and I went to state and Ole Miss basketball, and I was scared to death to leave my truck at the Barnes Crossing Mall, and you're like, nobody's gonna break in, and you were right. Like it's different down here. Like people take care of each other, and I think that's something that carries over to baseball. But Jared, enough rambling on my part. Let's talk Ole Miss.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
About that, I think there's a good quote that kind of summarizes kind of what you talk about. Obviously, it was an Ole Miss player mentioning something about Ole Miss, but the context remains the same when it comes to Mississippi. If you don't like Mississippi or don't want to come down and live in Mississippi, just don't come down here if that's what you want. Because once you come down here, like Mitch is living proof of that, you'll understand, and it's really tough to describe in the words. But Mitch, continue.
I mean, I will say, just total. Like today, I literally went and got a haircut, or I was supposed to get a haircut, right? And the lady closes her shop at 5. She literally just stayed open. She didn't have to. Stayed open just so I could get a cut, because next weekend I'm going to be in Starful, and, she wanted me to make sure I look good. So it's just, Mississippi's different. But Jared, Ole Miss opens the season up with Delaware Friday afternoon. What do you expect to see out of this series, and what are you excited to see about the series?
Well, I think the excitement kind of comes with multiple faces, depending on who you ask. Me personally, when watching this Ole Miss team, obviously it's been a while since I've seen them play a real baseball game. That was back in June, if you will. Like I mentioned, they returned 53% of the at bats in that College World Series and 50% of the innings thrown. I think when you look at Ole Miss this year, it's people associate last year's team with veteran leadership, and rightfully so. But there's some better leadership coming back on this year's team. But it's not just that. You have the number 2 ranked recruiting class coming in this year, and you have a couple JUCO and 4-year transfers to fill those immediate holes, and you're going to see some of those guys in action. So it's a very healthy mix of true freshmen who are expected to compete right off the bat, guys who are in the dog pile Omaha and play a big part in making that dog pile happen, and guys, you're coming in to try to join the party. If you will, you're going to see all of them on the field at one time. I think everyone knows what Jacob Gonzalez can do, and what Peyton Chatagnier can do, what Calvin Harris can do, TJ McCants. But one thing you want to look at, and obviously Hunter Elliott, who's going to start tomorrow being Friday, at the beginning of the series, but you want to see what how good is advertised as Ethan Groff, guy who's transferred to and expected to start in center field, or what Anthony.
I'm excited about him, Jared. I'm excited about that Tulane transfer.
Ethan Groff, yeah.
Oh my God! I watched him when he played Memphis, at Fogelman Park there in Memphis. Dude's a hell of a ball player. Like. And when I talked to Bianco, I know you talked to Bianco, but when I talked to Bianco last week, 2 weeks ago, the dude is excited about him. But that's just...
Yeah, there's another guy that he's really excited about, and we'll get to him in a little bit. And then you want to see what Anthony Calarco can do, who's, a power hitter like Groff, who's going to be filling that gaping hole where Tim Elko was at first base. And then you have a transfer who's going to cap off the weekend on the mound, is Xavier Rivas, a guy who, just shattered school records at Indianapolis and won every D2 pitching, accolade that there was there. And then you have a JUCO guy from one of the top JUCO baseball programs in the country, Delgado Community College, Ethan Leger, who's going to start at third base, a guy who Bianco, when you mentioned newcomers, he's one of the first guys mentioned. And along with newcomers, so to speak, there's going to be at least two true freshmen that are expected to kind of to see you right away and possibly right away is Grayson Saunier, the true freshman from Collierville High School, who's going to start Saturday. We saw what Hunter Elliott, true freshman, could do last year with Hunter Elliott. And obviously, he won every freshman award and got All-American honors, as a sophomore this year. We talk about some of the young pitchers that Bianco has had in recent times. We talked with Grayson Saunier right there, and he said, Grayson Saunier, he has put himself in a position, not only has he put himself in a good position to start, but he's seemingly figured it out faster than a lot of the other guys. And that's scary to think about when you consider, Hunter Elliott in the past, Ryan Rollison in the past, a bunch of true freshmen, Gunnar Hoagland when he was a freshman, and just being able to make an impact right away. So it's a very good mix of everything that you could kind of possibly want in kind of a title on the fence. But then again, there comes the question of, where is the bullpen, and how to kind of stack the last year's depth, because you have Jack Doherty, who could possibly be in the starting rotation right now. It really came down between him and Xavier Rios and Grayson Saunier, Hunter being the only obvious starter on the mound. But with Josh Mallett's being out for the season with Tommy John, one of the better bullpen arms of last year's postseason run, and overall in particular, who's going to kind of step up, take the mound? They have a lot of true freshmen who are going to be great. JT Quinn, Jordan Vera, Cole Ketchum, and a number of a replenished kind of bullpen, if you will. Obviously the familiar faces of Jack Doherty, Mitch Morrell, Matt Parento. And just the questions of, how are you going to handle a national title defense? And it's been asked ad nauseum to Bianco. I've asked it, you've asked it, everyone in the media has asked him.
I regret asking him.
Well, no. He was glad to ask the question because he's asked it he's answered it hundreds of times. And every time the answer is always the same. Yeah. Is when they went down to the governor's mansion to honor a national championship team, almost half those guys weren't even in that dog pile last year.
Yeah.
Last year had nothing to do with this year, but he also referenced, what Kirby Smart, said after Georgia football won the first national championship out of the last two. He says when someone comes up to you and congratulates you on the national championship, shake their hand, take their picture, say thank you. But at the end of that, think about, what did I do today? And what did I do, back then that can recreate this feeling? Because everyone wants to, be thanked, feel admired, feel loved. And, how do you do that? You work and you respond, and then you go into the next season.
Jared, two more questions I have for you. What do you know about Delaware? What do you expect to see from Delaware this weekend?
Delaware is a team, in the CAA, the Colonial Athletic Conference, that kind of struggled last season record-wise. They finished 25-26 overall. I think their season ended last year in the conference tournament. It's a conference that not a lot of people know about. Of course, they have to have an automatic qualifier every single year to get there. But look at the team; they returned they returned some of their best guys in the lineup, and Bianco, context or out of context, when asked about the season, all that, he's like, I'm just focused on Delaware right now. And of course, every coach, likes to say that, but you kind of tell that he's treating Delaware like every other opponent. They return their top three guys in the lineup, their top two guys as far as batting average, their top home run hitter from a year ago. I think the pitching, is their biggest concern, especially when you consider Ole Miss's lineup. They return. In the rotation this weekend, only one guy was there on last year's roster, a guy who only pitched 11 innings. So I think it's going to be one of those where, if Hunter Elliott maybe has an uncharacteristically rough start the season, kind of like what Doug Nikhazy did the year before, and all that, or if you think that that the other side is kind of not to test a little bit. You could see a game that that could be 7-5. You kind of slide up. I don't think it's going to be a pitcher's duel. I think Hunter Elliott is capable of. I say it like that, but I mean that they can't take Delaware lightly. Hunter Elliott is going to have a phenomenal. I mean, he finished off the year with 3 absolute masterpieces on the mound, and one of his best parts of his game was a slider. And what did he say he was going to work on this year? His slider. So he's only going to go up from here. So I fully expect to sweep this opening weekend. I don't expect Ole Miss players or coaches to take them lightly. Especially you have to overcome, all the national championship hoopla in a pregame. We're going to unveil an outfield national championship signage. I don't know where yet. I was actually driving by the stadium today. They haven't even finished the new batter's eye yet. Hopefully it gets finished. They're making it a lot bigger. They're making it 3 times bigger than it was. Ole Miss already had a very, very small batter's eye.
Yeah.
And they do a lot of construction out there with, the band field and all that. But, they gotta overcome all the festivities like they've been doing all season long, and then reality's going to set in, and, off they go with another national title defense. Who knows?
Jared, last question I have for you. Quickly give me your preseason, I'm not going to hold your feet to the fire, but your preseason prediction, how this season goes for Ole Miss.
I think obviously, experience is, the greatest teacher. And obviously, look no further than, last year's team is an indicator of that. A lot of those guys who are part of, a 2020 team that could have been the best team in Ole Miss history, it wasn't simply because the season got canceled and all of that. A lot of those guys are back in the fold. And a lot of those guys on the 21 team the following year who are also talented. Jacob Gonzalez, Peyton Schott, and he didn't chance. Calvin Harris, could have been one of the better countries in the last year, but he just so happened to be behind Hayden Dunhurst of all teams. So you have a lot of experience right there. And obviously the mix of the guys. But one thing about the SEC is that's anybody's game. I was just finishing up an article, and I was putting in there the SEC preseason coaches poll. Obviously, LSU is pretty much considered by everyone who really associates college baseball the favorite for this year's national championship team. Tennessee being right behind them in representing the SEC East, and rightfully so, especially with their just dynamite pitching that they have at their disposal. But when you look at SEC standings, and you see all of the teams in there, and you see a team like Mississippi State at the bottom of the SEC West, a team that's 2 years removed, a year and a half removed from winning the national championship. That just goes to show how brutal the Southeastern Conference is year on year. And Ole Miss experienced it firsthand last year when they went 7-14 in conference play. Got swept by Tennessee, Alabama, and then swept LSU. And then we took 2 of 3 from Auburn, a team that went to the World Series also.
Yeah.
And then the SEC East, while maybe not as loaded as the West, so to speak, Tennessee's going to be challenged all the time, like for a team like Florida and Vanderbilt, who are always the top dogs in the East. Ole Miss is well, let me go into the schedule real fast and say this Ole Miss schedule may be the toughest Ole Miss schedule I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Let me pull up this. Let me pull up the schedule real fast. I know at the top of my. I know a lot of the teams at the top of my head, but let me just run through. Maryland. Maryland is in the top 25 in basically every preseason college baseball poll. Louisiana Tech is in the NCAA tournament, is a constantly NCAA tournament threat, and they've been there. And they've always given Ole Miss fits. You have to play Maryland a 4th time when they go to the Canada College Classic in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is like a SEC Big Ten challenge where they face Maryland, Minnesota, and Nebraska. You got to play Southern Miss midweek, not once, but twice. You have Purdue coming to town. And then when you look at the beginning of SEC play, you have Vanderbilt, Florida, Texas A&M, Arkansas, Mississippi State, LSU, all right by each other.
Yeah.
An absolutely brutal stretch, especially once they get to kind of the tail of Louisiana Tech, and basically all the way. I mean, you can't even say like guarantee wins, but based on standings, once you get to Missouri, which is from May 4th, all the way from March 1st, so that's 2 exact months. It's going to be an absolute grind with seemingly no end. But this is why you come to Ole Miss. This is why you play for Southeastern Conference team. How I think Ole Miss will do, I think they are too talented to miss the postseason again. We said that last year. They almost missed the postseason based on everything that we just talked about. Southern Miss has been in the regional the last 2 years, and Southern Miss is obviously a top 10, top 15 team wherever you look, top 25 team. And then obviously I mentioned with the SEC. So I think at the very least, Ole Miss will go to a super regional, and I think that's worst case scenario, barring kind of another kind of stretch of just brutality that we witnessed last year, but a College World Series could still be a large reason why they're expected to get there again. But it's just a matter of what will happen when you get there. Ole Miss plays best baseball at the end of the year. Ole Miss will play its best baseball in stretches this year, but I think this year Ole Miss is going to have another, a typical